So I'm here with more Birds of Prey air combat in the Jet Age, continuing with this scenario called Aegean Thunder. We've got two planes left. In the foreground here we've got the F-16 fighting against a single F-4E Phantom here. So towards the end of the turn you do things like initiative rolls and sensor rolls. And visual sighting rolls and stuff like that, and actually the F-16 got the better of these as well. We made some initiative rolls, and actually the F-4 won the initiative, but then you do a thing called fixing, which is where you see if you've got a sort of upper hand, whether you're able to predict what the other plane's likely to do, you know, whether you're just seeing the bigger picture a bit better, and usually it's best to be sort of tailing something so that it's in front of your nose and you're on its tail, and then you get the best chance to fix. But both pilots tried to fix each other, and the Phantom is actually in a better position for a fix in this position, and he had like a 50% chance and failed, and the F-16, the Fighting Falcon, had a 30% chance and succeeded. And that fix now means that if we come over here onto the initiative track, you'll see the red cubes and the blue cubes. It means that the F-4 now has to plot his move and then move before the F-16 even has to plot a move. So he can now wait and see exactly what that F-4 is going to do before he has to do anything. So that's obviously hugely advantageous, and it makes the game a lot easier to play for me, because I don't have to try and second guess and come up with viable plans for both planes simultaneously. I just have to come up with a plan for the F-4, and then based on where it ends up, a plan for the F-16. So yeah, other things that happened, well, the F-4 pilot and weapons officer tallied the F-16, and they picked up a radar acquisition on it as well. And although it looks like it's not in a great position, the F-16 has actually still kept its radar track on the enemy plane, so so that track was maintained, and the pilot's still got a visual tally on him. So yeah, we've got radars all round, visuals all round, but the F-16 with the initiative, with the sort of, well, I don't know what you'd call it, but with the intuition going his way at the moment. So yeah, perhaps the F-4 pilot's still distracted by the loss of his wingman, and is still all a bit confused by that, and flying a little bit too predictably. Who knows? But anyway, we can make up reasons and stories why he lost the roll, but he lost the roll, and he's got to move first in turn 3. So we come into turn 3 with activity point recovery for both planes. Then we do declarations where they set throttle, idle, standard or afterburner, and then they can set radar modes, choose weapons, set decoys and flares. He could declare an initial gunshot. That's interesting. I don't think he's way out of gunshot range, so I don't think we'll be doing any of that. And then we'll be doing flight with the Phantom. So Birds of Prey here, Aegean Thunder, turn 3, and you can see now you can see the benefits of having a fix on something, because that F-4 Phantom has had to plot and move first. And so our F-16 pilot now knows exactly where he's gone and what's happening. And that is, yeah, clearly a huge advantage, because he now gets to plot and come up with a plan that is as beneficial to him as can be, if he can think of something. However, it's also quite a puzzle, because, you know, he's got, I think with his speed, he's got something like 14 move points. So if he just flew straight and level, he'd end up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere over here, being directly tailed by the Phantom. So clearly flying straight and level is not his best option, but what does he do to maintain some sort of advantage? Clearly, I mean, he could roll to one side or the other and try and break off in some direction, and probably the most natural way would be to sort of turn up over here-ish, but he's not going to be able to pull like a massive U-turn or anything. He is going to end up sort of, if he turns as hard, banks and turns as hard as he can to the right, he'll probably end up somewhere about there. And if he banks and turns to the left, he'll probably end up somewhere about here. You know, no, maybe here. Neither of these are looking like super attractive options. Does he go into the vertical? Does he swing? You know, does he roll and then pull straight up and try and then roll back onto his, you know, try and do some sort of cobra shape like this, pull up, and then, you know, flip over and roll with his cockpit back down. That might be interesting. That's looking like a better try. You know, I don't think he'll be able to pull a big turn up and another big turn down. I think it would be a 2-turn maneuver. But he might manage to pull up into a very steep climb and then roll ready for a you know, for a dive back down, and put the Phantom in a disadvantageous position like that. I think I'm going to try and plot something like that, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think it's fairly clear he'll lose his radar lock, but you know, is what it is. His radar's so good that it'll pick it back up again at some point when his nose is pointing in the right direction, and we'll go from there. So let's see. You know, he's currently got his cockpit pointed at the ground, so he's going to have to roll. He's going to have to roll a lot, pull up hard, and roll a lot. That looks like the move that we'll do, and we'll see what happens with that. Yeah, cool. Birds of Prey, end of turn 3. We've ended up in this position with the F4 here rolled onto his side, and the manoeuvre for the F16 that I was considering, you remember he was back over here somewhere, trying to pull up and then roll, pull up, roll. Well, he did do that, but he ended up way overshooting the F4 Phantom. He just couldn't pull the G's to get into a more vertical climb than this, and so ended up with a lot of horizontal movement, and so ended up over there rather than where he'd hoped to be back here. So both planes have lost radar contact with each other. This is outside. This guy is now 4,000 feet above the F4. So he's at a sort of 60-degree angle. He's actually in the sun cell, interestingly. The F4 pilot and weapons officer are looking directly into the sun to track the F4, but because they're not searching, they've already tallied him and can padlock him and stuff. They can spend extra activation points to keep track of him. That doesn't matter in this instance, and they're not trying to shoot or anything. Anyway, yeah, he's in the sun cell, so the angle off the nose cone, the pitch angle is too great, and the angle off nose is too great for the F4 radar to cope with. And as you can see, the F4 is now in a pretty much a blind spot. His aspect is 6 off the nose and 3 off the cockpit, so pretty much directly behind the F4. Although it doesn't look like it here, that's because these blocks don't actually give you the elevation; they only represent it. But you know, he's way up here relative to the F4. But anyway, yes. So we've ended up in this position at the end of turn 3. So this is 18 seconds of action we've now had in Birds of Prey. We've looked at one F4 has gone down, and it looked like the F16 might be able to get some advantage on the F4 by fixing him. but actually hasn't been able to convert that into anything advantageous. And actually now for next turn, the f4 has got a fix on the f16, so the f16 has got to plot and move first. And I think, given the situation, is going to attempt to at least sort of disengage as best he can. Now, the other interesting facet here is that the f16 has lost a lot of speed with this manoeuvre, and it started the scenario at something like 570, 580 knots, maybe more, maybe 610, something like that. I can't quite remember, but a high speed. Is down to 435 at the moment, so much slower now, because barely used any throttle and pulled up into a steep climb. I'm going to see that. I'm assuming that gives him a much tighter turning circle and some more manoeuvrability. And this f4 is still, well, he's rocking along at 520, so there's 100 knots difference between them. So I think the f16 is going to roll this way so that his cockpit's out over here and sort of drop back down into something of a diving turn round like this. But it'll end up being way up over here, and you know the f4 is going to track round and maybe have to pull up slightly, so he's probably going to have to roll so his cockpit's slightly up and then try and pull up into a sort of banked climbing turn like that. And we'll see how it goes, but we'll see if the f4 can get any sort of bead on the f16, but it looks like we may end up in one of these things where he's like a move or two behind. The f16's never going to get a shot position, neither's the f4, and we end up with a kind of disengagement. That's how it looks to me, but we'll see what happens, because we'll see whether the f16 can pull a sharp enough and interesting enough turn to look like he could get back round behind the f4, but I think it's doubtful. We'll see. Let's see what happens. Birds of prey then. This is the positions of the aircraft at the end of turn 4, and you can see the Falcon, which has got the blue cube next to it, the further plane away, has still got some jeopardy here. The F4 Phantom is doing a good job of pursuing it, turning into it and keeping it in front of its nose. So yeah, not quite, because of the height difference. There's 4,500 feet between these planes. So while they might look quite close, actually the Falcon up here is at a sort of 60-degree angle up in this direction relative to the F4 Phantom. So it's not quite as dangerous as it looks. But you know, the Phantom definitely has the initiative here and is trying to press for a viable shot. Whether he can sort that out is very much an open question. So I've just done initiatives going into the next turn, and the F4 has maintained a fix. So the Fighting Falcon has to plot and move before the F4 has to do anything. And so, you know, we're gonna carry on with this kind of pursuit to see if the Falcon can get out of this bind, or whether there's a viable shot that the F4 can line up. So lots of tension here going into turn 5. It remains quite a difficult spot for the Fighting Falcon at the moment. Whether I've flown him very badly or whether just 2-on-1 leaves you in this kind of situation, provided the two fly, as a team, I'm not clear on. But certainly remains some jeopardy in this situation. So let's see what happens. So I've done the F16 move here. He's plotted and moved. You see sort of reverse direction. He's come through the vertical and has changed direction now. Still a little bit above the F4, but the scale of the problem that the F4's got to try and stay with the lightning now becomes apparent, because you know, if he just turned, he'd end up somewhere over here facing off in that direction. So what does he do? Does he roll and start the process of diving round behind the F-16? That's probably what he's got to do. He's probably got to roll over, roll bank round so that his cockpit's facing down and try and follow him round into this loop. Whether he can do that, whether the plane does it, I don't know. But I think that's the move he's got, the manoeuvre he's got to try and pull if he's any hope. Because he could just power off in this direction, and the two planes, once he pulls out of his dive, the two planes are going to be facing opposite ways, and we disengage. So I suppose he's got to try and roll and follow and see if he can get something going on. So that's what he's going to do, and we'll go from there. So I actually ended up pulling the Phantom, the F4 Phantom on the left into a climb because he didn't want to sort of roll and lose altitude and end up, in front of and ahead of the the F-16. So I was just really wary of making a mistake on diving him too soon, and then because he was lower than the F-16 was anyway. So I thought, well, we'll gain some altitude and then roll and follow him round. We've reached this position here where the planes are, horizontally pretty close, and actually vertically pretty close. The F4 on the left is at altitude 83, 16,600 feet, and the F-16, I can't quite read all the blocks, but 72, so 14,000 feet, so slightly lower. I don't think there's much chance from here on of either plane really getting a shot in. I can't see how this now develops in such a way that either side has an advantage. I don't really think either side could claim to have an advantage here. They're basically pointing in completely opposite, sort of almost entirely opposite directions now, these two planes. So I think this might be a place to end, actually, even though they're apparently very close and still in the midst of a dogfight. That's such a symmetrical position. And like I say, pointing in opposite ways, that I don't feel much need to go on with it. So I did a quick check of the scores. The F-16 has scored 10 points, so 6 for shooting down an enemy aircraft, 3 for a viable missile shot, which ended up shooting down an enemy aircraft, and 1 for a fix on one turn. And the F4 Phantom, the remaining F4 Phantom, has got 2 points for his 2 fixes that he's managed to get. So 10-2, and that's a pretty handy win for the F-16. Yeah, really great fun, this game. So cool. Once you get into it, and you've got your you've sort of got your bearings, and you've got the process down for using all the stuff, and you've got the rules relatively straight in your mind. Yeah, it just flows really nicely, and the flying is marvellous. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Anyway, that was Birds of Prey. Going to do some non-flying things next.